The soft glow of the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink as Zoey hurried down the bustling streets of New York City. Her heart raced, not from the brisk pace of her walk, but from the anticipation of what awaited her. She was running late for her blind date, a concept she had sworn off years ago after a string of disastrous encounters. But her best friend Maya had been insistent, claiming that this guy was different. "He's perfect for you, Zoey. Trust me on this one." Zoey's stilettos clicked against the pavement as she rounded the corner, her eyes scanning the crowded sidewalk for the café where she was supposed to meet her mystery date. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, guiding her to her destination. As she approached, she caught sight of a man sitting alone at an outdoor table, his gaze fixed on a book in his hands. Her steps faltered for a moment as she took in his appearance. Tall, even while seated, with tousled dark hair and a strong jawline, he was undeniably handsome. Zoey smoothed down her floral dress, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Taking a deep breath, she walked up to the table. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible above the city's constant hum. "Are you Levi?" The man looked up, and Zoey found herself staring into the most captivating pair of hazel eyes she had ever seen. A slow smile spread across his face, causing her heart to skip a beat. "You must be Zoey," he said, standing up to greet her. His voice was deep and warm, like honey. "I was beginning to think you might not show." Zoey felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Work was crazy, and then the subway was delayed, and—" Levi held up a hand, his smile never faltering. "No need to apologize. I'm just glad you're here now." As they sat down, Zoey couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. Maybe Mia was right after all. The conversation flowed easily between them, jumping from topic to topic with a natural rhythm. Zoey learned that Levi was a wildlife photographer, his passion for nature evident in the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about his travels. She, in turn, shared stories about her work as an elementary school teacher, the challenges and joys of shaping young minds. As the evening wore on, the initial nervousness faded away, replaced by a comfortable familiarity that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Zoey found herself laughing more than she had in months, captivated by Levi's wit and charm. When the waiter came to clear their plates, Zoey was surprised to realize that hours had passed. The sky had darkened, the city lights twinkling like stars against the night. "I can't believe how late it's gotten," she said, glancing at her watch. Levi's expression turned sheepish. "I hope I haven't kept you out too late. I'm really enjoying talking with you, Zoey." The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter. "I'm enjoying it too," she admitted softly. As they left the cafe, Levi offered to walk her home. The streets were quieter now, the frantic energy of the day giving way to a more subdued atmosphere. They walked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing against each other, sending jolts of electricity through Zoey's body. When they reached her apartment building, Zoey found herself reluctant to say goodbye. She turned to face Levi, her eyes meeting his in the soft glow of the streetlight. "I had a wonderful time tonight," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Levi stepped closer, the space between them charged with unspoken tension. "So did I," he murmured. "Zoey, I'd really like to see you again." Her heart soared at his words. "I'd like that too," she replied, a smile tugging at her lips. For a moment, they stood there, neither wanting to break the spell that had fallen over them. Then, slowly, Levi leaned in, his hand gently cupping her cheek. Zoey's eyes fluttered closed as his lips met hers in a soft, tender kiss that left her breathless. When they parted, Zoey felt as though her world had shifted on its axis. She had never believed in love at first sight, but standing there with Levi, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, it was possible. As she watched him walk away, promising to call her tomorrow, Zoey couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of stolen moments and shared laughter. Zoey and Levi's relationship blossomed, each date bringing them closer together. They explored the city hand in hand, discovering hidden gems and creating memories that Zoey knew she would cherish forever. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Levi surprised Zoey with a picnic in Central Park. As they sat on a checkered blanket, surrounded by the lush greenery and the sounds of nature, Zoey couldn't help but feel that everything was perfect. "You know," Levi said, his fingers intertwined with hers, "I never thought I'd find someone like you." Zoey tilted her head, curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Levi's eyes met hers, filled with an intensity that took her breath away. "Someone who understands me, who sees the world the way I do. It's like you're the missing piece I didn't even know I was looking for." His words resonated deep within her, echoing her own feelings. "I know exactly what you mean," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him softly. As perfect as things seemed, life had a way of throwing curveballs. A month into their relationship, Levi received an offer for a prestigious photography assignment in the Amazon rainforest. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to document rare species and raise awareness about conservation efforts. The catch? He would be gone for 6 months. When Levi broke the news to Zoey, her heart sank. She was thrilled for him, knowing how much this meant for his career. But the thought of being apart for so long filled her with dread. I don't have to go," Levi said, his voice laced with uncertainty. "I could turn it down, stay here with you." Zoey shook her head, forcing a smile despite the ache in her chest. "No, Levi, this is your dream. You have to go." "But what about us?" he asked, his hands cupping her face gently. She leaned into his touch, savoring the warmth of his skin against hers. "We'll make it work. We have phones, video calls. It'll be hard, but if what we have is real, we can get through this." Levi pulled her close, holding her tight as if he never wanted to let go. "It is real, Zoey. What I feel for you, it's more real than anything I've ever known." The day of Levi's departure arrived all too soon. Zoey accompanied him to the airport, their hands clasped tightly as they walked through the bustling terminal. When it was time for him to go through security, Zoey felt as though her heart was being torn in two. "I'll call you as soon as I land," Levi promised, his forehead resting against hers. Zoey nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She pulled him in for one last kiss, pouring all her love and longing into it. As she watched him disappear into the crowd, Zoey took a shaky breath. 6 months. She could do this. They could do this. The first few weeks of separation were the hardest. Zoey threw herself into her work, staying late at school to grade papers and plan lessons, anything to keep her mind occupied. But at night, in the quiet of her apartment, the loneliness would creep in, leaving her aching for Levi's presence. Their phone calls and video chats became her lifeline. Hearing Levi's voice, seeing his face on the screen, it was both a balm to her soul and a painful reminder of the distance between them. He would regale her with stories of his adventures in the rainforest, his eyes alight with excitement as he described the exotic animals and breathtaking landscapes he encountered. Zoey lived for these moments, clinging to every word, every shared laugh. But as the weeks turned into months, she couldn't shake the nagging fear that their connection might be slipping away. It was during one of their video calls, about 3 months into Levi's assignment, that Zoey's fears came to a head. The connection was poor, Levi's image pixelated and his voice cutting in and out. "I miss you so much," Zoey said, her voice cracking with emotion. Levi's face softened even through the grainy image. "I miss you too, Zoey, more than you know." There was a moment of silence, filled only by the static of the poor connection. Then Levi spoke again, his words sending a chill down Zoey's spine. "Zoey, I've been thinking, maybe this isn't fair to you." Her heart dropped. "What do you mean?" Levi sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture Zoey had come to know so well. "You deserve someone who's there for you, not someone halfway across the world. I don't want you to put your life on hold for me." Tears welled up in Zoey's eyes. Are you breaking up with me?" "No." Levi's response was immediate and vehement. "God, no, I love you, Zoey. And I want what's best for you, even if that means letting me go?" Zoey finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Zoey's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She thought about the past few months, the loneliness, the longing. But then she thought about the joy Levi brought to her life, the way he made her feel alive in a way no one else ever had. "Levi," she said finally, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I love you too. And yes, this is hard. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done, but you're worth it. We're worth it. I don't want easy. I want you." Levi's relief was palpable even through the spotty connection. "Are you sure? I don't want you to resent me for being away." Zoe nodded, a watery smile spreading across her face. "I'm sure. We can do this, Levi. Just come back to me." "Always," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll always come back to you, Zoe." The remaining months of their separation were still challenging, but Zoe faced them with renewed determination. She started a countdown calendar, crossing off each day with a sense of anticipation. She threw herself into new hobbies, took up yoga, and even started learning Portuguese, a surprise for Levi when he returned. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the day of Levi's return arrived. Zoe paced nervously in the airport arrivals area, her eyes darting between the gate and the clock on the wall. When she finally spotted him in the crowd, her heart leapt. Levi's face lit up as their eyes met. He dropped his bags and ran towards her, sweeping her up in his arms and spinning her around. Zoe laughed, tears of joy streaming down her face as she clung to him. "You're here," she whispered, burying her face in his neck. "You're really here." Levi pulled back slightly, his hands cupping her face as he gazed into her eyes. "I told you I'd come back to you," he said softly before capturing her lips in a passionate kiss. In that moment, surrounded by the bustle of the airport, Zoe knew that every second of waiting had been worth it. Their love had been tested by distance and time, and it had emerged stronger than ever. As they left the airport hand in hand, ready to start the next chapter of their lives together, Zoe realized that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings. Sometimes they're about two people who choose each other every day, who fight for their love even when it's hard, who find home in each other's arms no matter how far apart they may be. And as she looked at Levi, his eyes shining with love and promise, Zoe knew that their story was just beginning. The weeks following Levi's return were filled with a joy so intense it almost felt surreal. They spent every possible moment together, making up for lost time and relearning each other's rhythms. Zoe delighted in the little things, the way Levi's eyes crinkled when he laughed, the feel of his hand in hers as they walked through the city, the comfort of his arms around her at night. But as the initial euphoria of reunion began to settle, they faced a new challenge: integrating their lives after months apart. Levi's experiences in the Amazon had changed him in subtle ways. He was more introspective, more passionate about environmental issues. Zoe, too, had grown during their time apart, becoming more independent and self-assured. They had to navigate these changes, finding a new balance in their relationship. There were moments of frustration and misunderstanding, times when the ease they once shared seemed just out of reach. But through it all, they remained committed to each other, to the love they had fought so hard to preserve. One crisp autumn evening, as they strolled through Central Park, the trees a riot of red and gold, Levi suddenly stopped walking. Zoe turned to him, curiosity etched on her face. "What is it?" she asked, noticing the intensity in his gaze. Levi took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he took hers in his. "Zoe, these past few months since I've been back, they've made me realize something." Zoe's heart began to race, a mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through her. "What's that?" "That I never want to be apart from you again," Levi said softly. Then, to Zoe's astonishment, he lowered himself to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Zoe, you are the most incredible person I've ever known. You're kind, passionate, and stronger than you know. You make me want to be a better man every day. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Zoe's eyes as Levi opened the box, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. For a moment, she was speechless, overwhelmed by the rush of emotions. Yes, she finally managed to whisper, nodding vigorously. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Levi's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He stood up, pulling Zoey into his arms and kissing her deeply. Around them, a small crowd that had gathered burst into applause, but Zoey barely noticed. In that moment, her entire world had narrowed to Levi and the promise of their future together. As they walked home that evening, Zoey couldn't stop staring at the ring on her finger, still hardly believing it was real. She thought back to that first blind date, how nervous she had been, how close she had come to canceling. If she had, she might never have met Levi, never have experienced this kind of love. "What are you thinking about?" Levi asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Zoey smiled up at him, squeezing his hand. "Just how grateful I am for you, for us, how one decision can change your entire life." Levi nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I know what you mean. Meeting you, it's like my life is divided into before and after. Everything changed when I met you, Zoey." As they reached their apartment, they had moved in together shortly after Levi's return. Zoey was struck by a sudden realization. "We have to call our families. And Mia, oh, she's going to be insufferable about how right she was about us." Levi laughed, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Well, she did play matchmaker. I suppose we owe her a thank you." They spent the next few hours making excited phone calls to family and friends, sharing their joyous news. As Zoey had predicted, Mia was ecstatic, her triumphant, "I told you so," ringing through the phone. In the days that followed, Zoey found herself caught up in a whirlwind of wedding planning. She and Levi agreed on a spring wedding, wanting to celebrate their love when the city was in bloom. They threw themselves into the preparations, choosing venues, tasting cakes, and debating color schemes. Amidst the excitement, however, a new challenge arose. Levi was offered another photography assignment, this time in Alaska to document the effects of climate change on wildlife. It was a shorter trip, only 2 months, but the timing would put him away during the crucial final stages of wedding planning. "I don't have to go," Levi said, echoing his words from before his Amazon trip. "The wedding is more important." Zoey felt a familiar tug in her heart, torn between wanting Levi by her side and knowing how important his work was to him. She took a deep breath, remembering the strength their relationship had found through distance. "No, you should go," she said firmly. "We've done this before, we can do it again, and this time we have something amazing to look forward to when you return." Levi pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "What did I do to deserve you?" he murmured. The day of Levi's departure for Alaska arrived, and this time Zoey felt a different kind of emotion as she said goodbye at the airport. There was still sadness, of course, but it was overshadowed by a sense of certainty and hope. This separation had a definite end date, and at the end of it, they would be starting their life together as husband and wife. "I'll be back before you know it," Levi promised, cupping Zoey's face in his hands, "and then nothing will keep us apart again." Zoey nodded, leaning in for a lingering kiss. "I'll be counting the days," she whispered against his lips. As she watched him walk through security, Zoey felt a surge of love and pride. This was the man she had chosen to spend her life with, passionate, dedicated, and always pushing to make the world a better place. The weeks without Levi flew by in a flurry of wedding preparations. Zoey threw herself into the planning, grateful for the distraction. She chose her dress, a beautiful ivory gown that made her feel like a princess. She and Mia spent countless hours discussing flower arrangements and seating charts. Through it all, Zoey and Levi stayed connected as best they could. Their nightly video calls became a sacred ritual, a chance to share the day's events and reaffirm their love. Levi would show her breathtaking photos of the Alaskan wilderness, while Zoey would give him updates on the wedding plans. One evening, about a month into Levi's trip, Zoey found herself feeling particularly emotional. The stress of planning a wedding largely on her own was starting to take its toll, and she missed Levi's steadying presence more than ever. "I wish you were here," she said softly during their call, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. Levi's face softened with concern. "Hey, what's wrong? Talk to me, Zoey." She took a shaky breath, trying to compose herself. "It's just, there's so much to do, and sometimes it feels overwhelming, and I miss you. I know it's silly, we've done this before, but it's not silly. Levi interrupted gently. I miss you too, more than I can say. And I'm sorry you're feeling overwhelmed. I wish I could be there to help. Zoey managed a small smile. I know, it's okay, really. I just had a moment of weakness, I guess. Levi was quiet for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Then his face lit up with an idea. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Close your eyes. Zoey raised an eyebrow but complied, closing her eyes as she sat in front of her laptop. Now, Levi's voice came through the speakers, warm and soothing. Imagine it's our wedding day. You're standing at the back of the aisle and you can see me waiting for you at the altar. Can you picture it? A smile spread across Zoey's face as she allowed herself to be carried away by the imagery. Yes, she whispered. Good, Levi continued. Now, as you walk down the aisle, think about everything we've been through to get to this moment. The laughter, the tears, the distance we've overcome. And know that every step is bringing you closer to our future together. Zoey felt a warmth spreading through her chest, her earlier stress melting away. When she opened her eyes, she found Levi watching her with a tender expression. Better? He asked softly. She nodded, wiping away a stray tear. Much better. Thank you, Levi. I love you so much. I love you too, Zoey, always. From that moment on, whenever Zoey felt overwhelmed by wedding planning or missing Levi, she would close her eyes and picture that walk down the aisle. It became her own private ritual, a reminder of what truly mattered. The remaining weeks of Levi's absence passed quickly, and before Zoey knew it, she was back at the airport, anxiously awaiting his return. When she finally spotted him in the crowd, her heart soared. He looked tired from the long journey, but his face lit up with joy when their eyes met. Zoey ran to him, throwing herself into his arms. Levi caught her easily, spinning her around as they both laughed, oblivious to the curious glances from passers-by. Welcome home, Zoey murmured against his neck, breathing in his familiar scent. Levi pulled back slightly, his hands coming up to frame her face. Home is wherever you are, he said softly, before capturing her lips in a tender kiss. As they left the airport hand in hand, Zoey felt a sense of completion, as if the final piece of a puzzle had fallen into place. With Levi by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of final wedding preparations. Levi threw himself into helping, determined to make up for lost time. Together, they tackled last-minute details, from finalizing the menu to writing their vows. Finally, the big day arrived. Zoey woke up early, her stomach fluttering with a mix of excitement and nerves. As her bridesmaids helped her into her dress, and Mia carefully arranged her veil, Zoey found herself thinking back to that first blind date, marveling at how far they had come. When it was time, Zoey took her father's arm and prepared to walk down the aisle. As the doors opened and she caught her first glimpse of Levi waiting for her, looking handsome in his tuxedo, all her nervousness melted away. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. Just as she had imagined during those long-distance phone calls, Zoey walked down the aisle, her eyes locked with Levi's. With each step, she felt the strength of their love, the journey they had taken to reach this moment. As they exchanged vows and rings, promising to love and support each other for the rest of their lives, Zoey knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. Whatever challenges life might bring, they would face them together, their love a constant guiding light. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Levi pulled Zoey close, kissing her with a passion that spoke of promises kept and a future filled with love. As their friends and family cheered, Zoey and Levi turned to face them, hand in hand, ready to step into their new life together. Their love story, born from a chance blind date and strengthened through distance and challenges, had reached a new chapter. But as Zoey looked at Levi, seeing all the love and promise in his eyes, she knew that the best was yet to come. Their greatest adventure was just beginning, and they would write each page together, side by side, hand in hand, heart to heart.